how the students perform at the end of each year on standardized tests. And we have many examples of that in our work of ELT. And beyond that, then we aggregate that idea of direct causality and we create league tables of schools that do better or less well than other schools. And that's based on the idea of how students perform, which is based on how teachers teach, which I would argue is based on this myth of direct causality. But, as I said earlier, myths include an element that is true. And in the case of this myth of direct causality, the opposite, that teaching has nothing to do with learning, is clearly also not true. Teaching is not disconnected from learning. They are interconnected in some way, but it's not the direct cause and effect connection that we would see in the pool shot. What teaching does, it seems to me, is it influences learning. It shapes possibilities. It creates opportunities to learn. So here's an image that sort of captures that relationship of teaching and learning, which is more close to the one that I think we live and know as teachers, but not the one that we mythologize and use in reasoning socially about teaching and learning. This is the relationship that my colleague at Michigan, David Cohen, refers to as the relational connection between teaching and learning, the way in which a teacher's move connects to students' move, which connects to teachers' moves, and as you can see, it not only moves through time, but it spirals in a seemingly almost disconnectable set of interrelations. So the fact is that teaching does relate to learning. Obviously, that's what gives us jobs. That's what makes our work. But the question is how we understand that relation as influence rather than as cause and effect. As teachers, I think we often overlook Escher and we get engineered into thinking about our work from the point of view of the pool table and the pool shots. And that takes me then to the second myth, which is the myth that I'm calling the myth of sole responsibility. And that's the myth that as a teacher, I am solely responsible for making learning happen in the classroom. Now, I can see a lot of thought bubbles out there and online saying, no, I don't actually believe that. I know I have a role, but I don't think I'm the only thing that makes learning happen in my classroom. But hang on for just a minute. This myth of sole responsibility is a way of naming a personal dimension of what we do. It's the agency that we feel. It's the efficacy that we feel. That when things work or when they don't work, we have a share of responsibility as teachers in that aspect of the work. And so as a teacher, I realize that I do act often as if I am responsible for what's going on in my lessons. I'm the one who makes the critical decisions about what's going to be taught. I plan the lesson. I'm the one who figures out how to present the content. I prepare the materials. So in this sense, it is probably fair to say that I view teaching as my responsibility. But when it happens, it's much more like a chessboard than it is a pool table. The moves that I make open up moves that then students make. And then the moves that the students make reshape the possibilities of moves that I can make. What we used to call, when we studied teacher thinking, decision making. The interaction really between this set of unfolding positive moves in which each one influences the next one as the game of the lesson progresses. So my point here is really that responsibility is distributed, which is very different than to say that it is shared. When I say that responsibility in a lesson between the teacher and learners is distributed, what I mean is it's organized very much like that image of the chess game, in the way that one move or decision or action shapes the possibility of what comes next. So this interplay between moves we could think of as opportunities. Opportunities to teach on the teacher's side and opportunities to learn on the student side. What's interesting is that these opportunities, when they line up, seem almost seamless. It's all working. But then when they don't line up, that's when we really see this idea of sole responsibility surfacing. A colleague of mine was telling me a story. She'd been gathering data for a project on early literacy in a kindergarten classroom in Detroit. And she was in the classroom, and the children were doing a drawing exercise to illustrate a story that the teacher had read. And one of the children finished his drawing ahead of the others and brought it up to the teacher, and it was a drawing of a horse, sort of like this. Probably not quite as well done, I'm not sure. And he brought it up to the teacher, and he showed it to her, and he said, "Here's my drawing from the story." And the teacher said to him, let's call the little boy Jason, he said, "Jason, that's a very nice drawing. Why don't you go back and color your horse in?" Reasonable chess move. So Jason went back and he colored in the horse. And then the lesson came to an end, and my colleague was packing up her video camera and notes and so on, and she saw Jason go up to the teacher and say, here's your horse. And the teacher said, "No, Jason, no, that's not my horse, that's your horse." And Jason said, "No, my horse wasn't colored in." That's what I mean, that when the chess moves don't line up, we actually see how we exercise our responsibility as teachers. Now, that story is not about being a good or bad teacher. That's simply something that happens. It happens with such great daily regularity that I don't think we can penalize or criticize it. But it does show the way in which we do work according to this myth of responsibility, of sole responsibility, that, oh, Jason finished a little early, let me think of something I can ask him to do. Why doesn't he color it in? And that'll keep him busy while the other kids are drawing. Oops, it's not his horse by the time it's all over. So the first two myths that I've talked about could be summarized in this statement, which a Brazilian teacher